Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. So this will be a review of the second chapter of my book. So this one is called The Whipping Post, so that's the name of the second chapter. So I'll go into a bit of preamble about this chapter and I'll go into actually what I'm talking about. This chapter is mainly there in order to show the fact that people are more predisposed towards negative emotion than positive emotion. There is more stuff in this world that evokes negativity than there is that evokes positivity, right? So for example, think about the amount of stuff which tastes good versus the amount of stuff which doesn't taste good. Think about the amount of stuff which looks bad or uninteresting versus the amount of stuff that looks good. Think about the amount of stuff that smells good versus the amount of stuff that smells bad or like average or whatever. You're always going to find that there's more negative aspects than there is positive aspects, because as humans we need a very specific combination of attributes in order to even stay alive, and those specific attributes, specific temperature, specific amount of food, specific amount of water, specific breathing environment, specific atmosphere, all of these different qualities are, if you go like slightly out of the range, you just die, right? So if like you get, I think it's like 7 degrees above your core temperature, then you're just like near enough dead, or your cells start to denature, or whatever it might be. So because of this, we live in it's like the Goldilocks zone effectively. I think that's what it's called when it comes to like temperature and our space in the galaxy. We are effectively in this super Goldilocks zone as humans in order for us to live, and then we're in this like hyper Goldilocks zone when it comes to stuff which we find appetitive or stuff which we find good or enjoyable. That's a big rarity, and I'm trying to make the case here that there is more negativity than positivity in the world, and it's not really close, the amount of negativity compared to positivity. So first of all, the chapter starts out with me talking about prose similar to Arthur Schopenhauer's prose in his The World as Will and Representation, especially the parts on suicidality and the parts on I think it was Studies in Pessimism. I referred a lot to that when writing this, so it's fairly similar to it. So yeah, this is prose, so it's more poetic sort of speech. It can't really be condensed down very easily. It's probably best for you just to read the first part of the second chapter and then glean from that your own understanding and your own ideas of what I'm saying, what I'm talking about and stuff like that. I think that'll be the best way to engage with that part of the book. The next part of the book is entitled dukkha, and dukkha is a Buddhist word, is a word referring to an idea in Buddhism which effectively translates to life does not satisfy. Buddhism is a very interesting, in some ways pessimistic, in some ways optimistic, but has a negative outlook of the world to a large extent, which a lot of religions do, but Buddhism is particularly interesting. And what Buddhism says about dukkha is effectively there are ways in order to get out of dukkha, and in order to do this you have to cultivate happiness within yourself, which is not dependent on external events. However, in my opinion, the only way to do that, the only way that can be the case, is if the pain which you are experiencing is towards a certain end. So let's say you are suffering for a reason, you are feeling pain for a reason, you're going through negative life events in order to achieve something. Like imagine you go to the gym and you feel pain when you're working out, but this pain is felt for a reason. It's felt for the reason of you getting stronger later on in your journey. It's felt for the reason of you building up more power, more confidence, more ability to do whatever you want to do in the gym or outside of the gym, whatever it might be. That's the reason behind the existence of the pain. The pain is meaningful. However, if you have meaningless pain, which happens a lot, or an idea which I'm going to talk about in like my 7th book, so that's way down the road, the idea of pain onto life and pain onto death, right? So if you like randomly get your leg chopped off, that would be pain onto death, right? However, if you go through surgery in order to remove a necrosed limb, which is causing you a lot of pain, and if you do that, you'll be able to like continue on with your life, that would be pain onto life, right? Because the chopping off of the limb in the second example would hurt, but it would hurt for a reason. There would be pain in order to improve your life. Pain onto life instead of pain onto death, right? So that's that idea. So The third part of the second chapter here, I talk about the idea or an interpretation of Pandora's box. Right, hold on. Actually, quickly, when I was speaking about the second part of the second chapter, I want to bring up something interesting about Sisyphus. So Sisyphus is a perfect example of somebody whose pain is not for any reason, and this is why I don't like the ideas of Camus, because Camus says that Sisyphus, we can imagine Sisyphus happy. I completely disagree with this idea for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons why I disagree with it is because Sisyphus cannot do otherwise in his task, and Sisyphus finds his own task meaningless in his own estimation. There is no reason or purpose behind Sisyphus' suffering, and therefore Sisyphus will not be happy in his task. So now let's go on to the third part of the second chapter. So my interpretation of Pandora's box, the Pandora's box story, is relatively different from what a lot of people see it as. So I see hope as being the worst thing that came out of Pandora's box, because because hope is both the precursor and the perpetuator of all negative states. So let's start off with the perpetuator. So if hope didn't exist, then people would not keep on going on with life after all of the other negative stuff came out of Pandora's box. The hope was the fuel which kept the negative fire going. If there was no hope for the better, false hope in this case, then they wouldn't have kept going through their trial and their turmoil. They would have just ended it. They would have just called it a day effectively on their lives, because they would see at that point that there was no hope, and then they would stop trying effectively. And because hope is the perpetuator of negative states, hope in this way is the ultimate negative state. So that's how it is the perpetuation. Now, as a precursor to all negative events, this is where it gets a bit more interesting. So think about all negative states. All negative states could be said to be derived from the unfulfilled, could be said to be derived from unfulfilled hope. Hope which is disintegrated effectively, right? So I give the example of the gift. You hope for a greater gift than you actually get, and then because you hoped for something better, the gift which you get is now devalued because it is lesser compared to the gift which you had in your mind, the gift which you hoped for, right? If you hope for nothing, you can never be disappointed. But if you hope for everything, you're going to be always maximally disappointed. Hope in this way is the precursor to all negative states. If you hope for anything, then you're always going to have the ability to be disappointed, to be upset. And this is where despair gets into it. If you always feel despair and you always have no hope for anything, then you're always going to be pleasantly surprised when anything good happens to you. However, this has a fairly big caveat, because you're always going to be feeling despair. You're always going to have despair, and if you always have despair, then what happens is that you're always going to have your baseline life is always going to be a negative one. You're always going to be sad at base, and then you're going to have small spikes of happiness, but your baseline will always be sadness or negativity, right? So that means in order to feel joy maximally, you have to feel pain maximally, you have to feel despair maximally. You can't really deal with this idea, right? It's very hard to wrap your head around, very hard to engage with it, because you can't feel hope because if you feel hope all the time, you're always going to be disappointed, and if you always feel despair, you're always going to feel despair, right? So that's the negative side of it. So right here at the end of the chapter, and this is how I end things off here. So if it is true that movement is a prerequisite for sentience and hope a prerequisite for movement, is it not that true pessimism is the impossible truth of reality and the unattainable esti, which I won't talk about esti here, but just forget about that bit for now. You can read the book and then you'll understand what esti is. As such, true pessimism is impossible to achieve. Partial pessimism leaves a foul aftertaste, and hope, all in all, is a vile repast. As such, life is suffering, but now the question arises, is life getting better or worse? So that's the little ending I'll leave off in order to come towards the third chapter. But yeah, there you go. That is my explanation of how there's more negative in the world than there is positive. And that is the end of the second chapter of the book. I'll be talking about the third chapter fairly soon, so I'll see you lot then. Have a good one, and see you later.